Hello to our secondary students, teachers, and administrators. My name is Mike Lane. I'm the Executive Director of Learning and Teaching for the Wenatchee School District. I'm excited to welcome you to this presentation about thriving in a stressful world. I think we can all agree that the last year has been stressful, but while the pandemic will eventually come to an end, there will always be things in life that cause stress and anxiety. And responding to those situations in positive and productive ways is the key to staying physically and mentally strong. Chase Mielke is our presenter today. He is an award-winning high school teacher, speaker, and the author of The Burnout Cure, Learning to Love Teaching Again. A Michigan Teacher of the Year nominee, Chase is dedicated to teaching the science of purpose, perspective, and perseverance. He has traveled all over the US and all over the world to help students and young adults learn the science and strategies to create their best life. When he's not daydreaming about food and sleep, he loves running, camping, and thinking about weird questions like, is water wet? He thinks it is. Please join me in welcoming Chase Mielke.
Good morning, students of Wenatchee Schools. I am Chase Mielke. I am a speaker, author, full-time educator, and believe it or not, fully grown adult. So often I go into schools and people think I'm one of the students wandering around the halls and they yell at me and tell me I need to go where I need to go. But the reality is I have been teaching for over 13 years, and the thing I love to teach most is the science of well-being. What is the actual science behind thriving and dealing with stress and having optimism within the world? Now, I have had a chance to travel all over the world as a result of the work that I do. I've had a chance to travel to small remote villages in the middle of Alaska, deep in the Alaskan tundra, where I got to wrestle bears. Even though they were stuffed, they still won. Here I am riding on an elephant in Thailand, where I had a chance to work with Thai students. Here I am on the streets of Istanbul, Turkey. Here I am in my classroom. Here I am as a turkey. Now, the thing that you need to know about me, real talk, is that if you had met me when I was your age, there is no way you would have thought this guy is going to be a teacher. He's going to teach people about happiness and thriving. Why? Because I was a horrible student. I was a pain in the butt delinquent. I was that student that every teacher dreaded having in the classroom because I had one goal in life: mischief. All I wanted to do was to try to torment my teachers and create mischief. So most people would probably think there's no way he's going to teach this stuff because there's no way he's going to graduate high school. To give you a sense of how big of a punk I was permanently kicked out of my Spanish class in high school. Like, not expelled, not suspended, like Spanish class still happened. I was just no longer invited. And I'll give you a little backstory that kind of defends me in this situation, that even though I was about mischief, my teacher made it really, really hard because she wore every single day a fanny pack. Now, I'm not anti-fanny pack, but for real, why do you need a fanny pack, lady? Like, we have these things called pockets. So it became my mission to just figure out what is in this fanny pack. Every day I would raise my hand, Senora, what's in the fanny pack? My school, we would sing Spanish songs in order to learn Spanish, and the class would be sitting there singing, and I'd be like, te quiero tanto, 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 what's in the fanny pack? What is in your fanny pack? And she would just scowl at me, point to the door, and I would be kicked out. Now, interestingly enough, every time I would get kicked out of Spanish class, which was every single day, meeting me in the hallway was this very short, very bald, very smiley guy named Pat. Pat was my assistant principal in school. And every time I caused mischief, no matter what, Pat would be there. I used to climb out of the window in the middle of my English class, and waiting outside, there's Pat. I tried to hide dead fish all over the school, and meeting me in my next classroom, Pat. I tried to organize a bring your dog to school day, and meeting us in the parking lot before we could enter with our puppies, believe it or not, was Pat. Now, I was convinced that no adults cared about me, that life was pretty much pointless. The reality is that I was dealing inside with a lot of things like depression and having an alcoholic father and feeling low self-esteem. I didn't feel like life had meaning and purpose. But Pat, this one smiley, short little dude, taught me a different way. You see, he treated me like an adult. He acknowledged that I was struggling. He acknowledged that I wanted influence. And what he showed me more than any other adult is that my influence could be used in better ways, that I had the power inside me to actually change my circumstances. And most of all, I needed to stop blaming my teachers and my circumstances for my living and my happiness. I'm here with you today to hopefully help make some of those shifts for you, to help you understand that you have everything within you to rise above these stressful circumstances. That no matter how challenging life is, no matter how many challenges you have in your history or potential future, that you have everything within you to overcome them. So that's what we're going to dive in here today. Now, before we get into the idea of potential and growth and learning and being our best selves, let's take a moment to fully own how we have functioned over the past few months. So I want you to think about what type of learner have you been over the last few months with this virtual setup? Now, even though it's not ideal, sometimes we make it a little bit worse. And I say this as an adult as well. Consider for a moment, what has been your virtual or Zoom sin? What is the thing you have done that you're like, yeah, probably not my best self? For example, have you committed Zoom sin A? You totally forget that you're not muted. The next thing you know, everyone in the entire class can hear you jabbering on. They can hear you playing Call of Duty. They might even hear you trashing the teacher. Have you committed Zoom sin B, the nose gold champion? That you don't even pay attention to where your camera is. And then all of a sudden, everyone has a full shot of all those boogers up your nose. Or have you committed Zoom sin C? You completely turn off the camera. Now, you might be doing it for lag issues, or you might be asleep. You might be wandering around your room eating Cheetos. You might be on the toilet. We have no idea. I'll tell you one thing for sure. You don't want to combine C, being on the toilet, with A. Not cool. So own that you may have had some challenges. Own that maybe you weren't at your best self. And then ask yourself, what can I do to overcome that? What can I change? Who can I listen to? How can I live my life to get the most out of this experience? You see, I'm going to start things fresh off with the secret of having a better life, of overcoming circumstances, of having optimism and accomplishing your goals. So I'm going to invite you right now to lean in close because I'm going to give you the secret. Now, if you're at home and people are nearby you, make this look really weird. Like lean in real close here. Here is the secret of getting the life that you want. It is understanding this formula. That circumstances do not define our outcomes. What ultimately defines it is our actions and our attitude. You can have the most challenging circumstances. It can be negative, but if your actions and your attitude are positive, you will rise above them. On the flip side, though, if you have a negative circumstance and you have negative actions and negative attitude, you will only make those outcomes worse. This is ultimately what Pat taught me, that I need to stop blaming the world for where I'm at and start taking control of my mind and my actions. In this talk, we're going to be diving into what I call multipliers. What are the actions and attitudes that you can use not just to get through a pandemic and teaching and learning right now, but how you can get where you want to be in life? And let's start by exploring one of the big challenges that so many of us are experiencing, and that is fear. There is so much fear in the world right now. I mean, literally, there's a pandemic. There are murder hornets. There are people in goat suits crashing into buildings. There's a lot to be freaked out by. But what I want to talk about is more than just those fears. I want to talk about all fears. What are the things you're afraid of that have gotten in the way of living the life you want? Have you found yourself, for example, afraid to ask for help? Have you found yourself freaked out at the idea of asking a question in the middle of a virtual lesson? Have you found yourself afraid to challenge your family's history and live the life you want? Have you found yourself afraid of being your authentic self, of talking about and carrying out your goals because you're so afraid that other people are going to judge or critique you? What does it look like to overcome these fears? Now, the thing you should know is that I have learned a lot about fear in particular. I have really explored the idea of what makes people afraid and how to overcome it. And I have put it to test in my own life. Think of some things that you are afraid of. Like, think of phobias right now. Are you afraid of spiders? Are you afraid of heights? Are you afraid of people in clown suits? Which, let's be honest, no one should be in a clown suit. It's freaky. It's weird. For me, my biggest fear has always been snakes. That's right, snakes. From as early as I can remember, I was freaked out by snakes because here's the thing. First of all, snakes are freaky because they can be anywhere. You can be going for a hike out in the woods and then boom,
I'm a snake.
snake in a tree. You could be swimming along in the water and then boom,
I'm a slithery little sneaky snake.
snake in the water. You could be wandering around your own backyard and
Slithering in your garden, catching me a mouse.
snakes can be anywhere. And the other thing that freaks me out is that I know what they're thinking. I don't know if you've seen that Harry Potter movie where he like understands snakes. Like I understand what they're thinking. And every single snake I see has one thought on their mind. I'm going to kill you. That's what I feel. That's what I believe whenever I see a snake. Now I'll give you some history as to how I got so freaked out by snakes. My earliest memory, my earliest dream involved a snake. Here's how it played out. One day I'm sitting there and all of a sudden, like I'm asleep right now, but I'm dreaming that I'm seeing my family in the living room and slithering through our house is a giant python. It slithers up the stairs to our bedroom. The next thing I know, because dreams get weird, the next thing I know, I am riding on the snake's back. Now I'm 5 years old right now, and me and my entire family are on the snake's back. And as we're slithering down, the snake turns its head back at me and it says, "If you say anything, I will eat you." And little 5-year-old me, innocent to the world, I look at the snake and in my dream I say, "But why?" And in a split second, snake eats me. I wake up, pee in the bed, freaked out, terrified. And from that moment on, I was like, "No, thank you, snakes. I don't want to deal with you right now."
I'm a snake.
Now, I'm going to give you the next step, how this really came to unfold as a fear. Fast forward to high school. This is not a dream. This is real life. I'm in high school chemistry class. And all of a sudden, we have a substitute teacher one day. Now, to give you a little background, my school where I grew up is like a pretty country school. Like it's a small town. And see, we would always get some really weird substitute teachers. I don't know if you've ever had any before, but like this guy was kind of out there. His whole thing is when he would come substitute for a school, he would bring a giant Rubbermaid bin. And inside that bin was a random animal. How he got away with this, I have no idea. But he comes into our classroom with this animal and he says, "All right, class, if you do real good today at the end of the lesson, I'm going to show you this animal. You don't know until you behave." And so here I am trying to be cool as a high school student, back at the chemistry lab, and I'm like, whatever, animals. And so homeboy, end of the class period, gets up, lifts the bin, emerges from the bin with a baby anaconda. Now, a baby anaconda is still huge. He sets it out on the lab table, and I hear it saying to me, "I'm going to kill you." But I'm a cool high school student, so I'm in the background like, snakes, whatever. But on the inside, I'm like, "Oh my God, it's like, so he sets the snake out on the lab table. He's trying to teach us all about snakes and how they're supposedly cool. The snake starts slithering off the table because it's coming to murder me. And all of a sudden, he just stands in front of it, still teaching, to block it.
I'm a snake.
The snake is a little adaptable, so it starts going the other route. Meanwhile, I'm in the corner like, stupid snake, get out of here. And on the inside, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's coming to murder me. He goes to block it off again.
I'm a slithery little sneaky snake.
And the next thing I know, this snake, almost in slow motion, kicks its head back. I'm going to kill you. Lunges for his stomach, bites him in the gut. He rips off the snake and blood is coming through his shirt. And I've gone from this is cool to this is not okay right now. I practically pee myself freaking out because I know that if that guy was not there, that weird substitute teacher, I probably would have died. From that moment on, anytime I even thought about a snake, I freaked out. If I saw a snake in a book, I freaked out. If I saw a snake as I'm flipping through TV and on cable, next up on National Geographic, a snake, I would start hyperventilating. I was so terrified that I thought to myself, this is no way to live life. So it became my mission to understand fear and how to overcome it. And I want to share with you a little bit about what happens so that you can overcome not only snakes, but fears like being your best version of yourself. But we're going to take a little detour and talk about how do you get there? How do you grow and overcome these things? You do that by taking positive risks. Before I share how I overcame my fear of snakes, I want you to consider this idea. I want you to imagine back to your original self, your first emergence as a human being. Imagine yourself as a baby and think about what were your skills? What are babies born able to do? I got the list for you. It's right here. Babies really can only do a few things. They can eat, they can sleep, they can breathe, they can use their senses, they can digest both in and out, and they have basic reflexes. In other words, this skill set is not getting you into Harvard. It's not going to pave the way for you to accomplish your goals. But babies are born with something else. We'll explore that. Take this scenario. Walking is a skill beyond the baby. A baby does not emerge from the womb like, hello, mother, hello, father, let's go for a stroll. But a baby learns how to walk, and here's how. All of us, from the moment we are born with the ability and the desire to take positive risks. Have you ever watched a baby try to walk? It's fascinating. They're kind of like little drunk people. You set them up and they're like wobbling around and they're like, oh. And then what happens is they take this step, and you know when they take the step, they're going to crash and burn. But the baby takes a step and wham, slams on the ground. Now, interestingly, the culture around this, everyone's like, yeah, baby, try it again. No one's looking at that baby like, bummer, guess you're not getting into college. Like, we lift that baby up for taking that risk, even though the baby wasn't successful. And rather than being like, no more walking, I'm done. Baby don't care. Baby's like, let's do it again. You see, this illustrates something that we get stuck in later in life. Everything within this box represents our comfort zone, the stuff we're naturally comfortable doing. We don't have to think about it. However, everything beyond it is what we call the growth zone. In order to grow, we have to step out of our comfort zone. A baby has to take a step, even though it's going to fall. But over time, if you take enough of these baby steps, challenging your fears, introducing things that you haven't done before, you develop new abilities. Think about all the things you would love to be comfortable doing. How amazing would your life be if you were comfortable asking a question in class? How amazing would it be if you were comfortable accepting help from others? If you were comfortable singing in front of others, of standing and giving a speech? How amazing would it be if you were comfortable giving it your all for your goals? If we want to challenge our fears and get the most out of our experiences, we have to take positive risks because there is no growth without risk. So what is that thing that you want in your life, and what are you willing to do to try it? I overcame my fear of snakes by addressing the brain, the mental stuff that goes into fear. I realized that there are two routes to fear. There's this logical thing, and then there's this emotional thing. So here's what I did as a grown adult to overcome this fear. First, I started looking up statistics of snakes. Did you know you are more likely to die from falling out of bed than from a snake? You are more likely to die from icicles than from a snake. So I started looking at this research. I'm like, I'm not freaked out to go to bed or walk under icicle. I shouldn't be afraid of snakes. Now, that's step one. Step two is you actually have to lean into the discomfort. So here's what I did. In our school where I teach, there's a biology teacher who, for some stupid reason, has a boa constrictor in her classroom. Science teachers love to have weird animals. I don't know what it is. But I remember I would go to school some days as a teacher, freaked out that the boa constrictor had fallen out of its cage, and here it is,
Southern in your garden, catching me a mouse.
ready to murder me. But I thought this is my opportunity. So I sought out this teacher and I said, hey, can I approach this snake? Can I hold this snake someday? She's like, yeah, sure. Why are you asking? No problem. So what I would do is every day after school, I would walk up, and as I would get close to that cage, I would start hyperventilating, heart would start racing. And the first day I would walk 2 steps into the room, and then I'm like, I'm out, and I would run away. The next day, I would get a little bit closer and a little bit closer and a little bit closer, and I would freak out, and then I would walk away until finally one day after a month of doing this, I was like, it's go time. So she brings out this giant boa constrictor, and it looks at me.
I'm a snake.
It says to me, I'm going to kill you. But I'm like, all right, deep breathing, calm it down. I hold out my arms. She puts this beast into my arms. Snakes are heavy and they are strong. And all of a sudden, I feel it starting to wrap around my arm, and it flexes on me, squeezes. And I am in this mode of like, what am I doing? And the science teacher says, hey, just so you know, don't panic, because if you get nervous, the snake gets nervous too. And I'm like, thanks for sharing that with me now as I'm holding this snake. And all of a sudden, as I'm breathing, this snake kicks its head up back to me. It says, I will kill you. And I'm panicking, but I'm breathing and I'm remembering positive risks. And it slowly darts away from my face. I take one final deep breath, hold it back out to the teacher, and I walk very briskly out of that room, knowing that I don't like snakes still don't think they're the coolest thing in the world, but I knew that I could overcome my fears. If I could deal with that very tangible, real threat, I could deal with the other fears in my life. It involves taking those risks. Now, I want to explore with you a little bit more of what happens in your brain that makes it hard to overcome these risks and makes it even hard to deal with stress. Let's talk about the brain itself and how we can hone our resilience. Imagine you are giving a speech in front of your entire school, your entire community. You don't get a choice of the speech. We're going to give you a topic for 5 minutes. You have to stand up and give a speech. What would you think? What would you do? How would your body respond? You see, what happens in the human brain is that as soon as something seems freaky or frightening, your brain starts preparing to survive. Now, I'll give you an example. Let's imagine that you are walking out in the woods, just kind of observing the world. Everything you're experiencing is being channeled to your brain. Everything you think,
I'm so hungry.
everything you hear, everything you smell. All of it goes to a very specific part of the brain. And that part of the brain is called your amygdala. Say that word out loud as weird as you can, amygdala. Now, your amygdala is deep within the center of your brain, and it processes all human emotion. Everything you experience, it's trying to figure out, what is the purpose of this? Now, even though it processes all human emotion, it only stores the unpleasant, the negative. It only cares about the things that could be threatening. And as soon as your body senses something threatening, instantly it goes into fight or flight response. You've had that before, where you're giving a speech and all of a sudden your arms are acting all wonky, pit sweat is happening, you feel the blood rush to your face, your legs want to dart. That is your body preparing to survive. Now, even though you're not actually going to die from giving a speech, your body doesn't care. It prepares that way anyway. Now, interesting thing that you should know is that teenage brains have more sensitive amygdalas than at any other point in your life. So for some of you in your brain right now, your amygdala is more sensitive to potential threats. If you've had that moment before where your parents are like, hey, did you take out the garbage? And you're like, Mom, stop messing with me. And then you think like, okay, I overreacted. It's because your amygdala saw that moment from your parents as a potential threat. Now, the first spot it goes is the amygdala, and then only later does it meet what is called your prefrontal cortex. This is the logical part of the brain. This is the part of the brain that actually thinks normally and can problem solve and help you come up with opportunities to improve, but it doesn't get the information first. So our brains prioritize threats and stress more than thriving and problem solving, which means you might be in this mode of like, all right, that's kind of a bummer. Like, what do we do now? What we do is we know when we're experiencing these things and we try to actively overcome them. Let me put the scenario to you like this. I want you to imagine that this cup represents your brain's ability to think logically and focus. All of this space is the part of the brain that can help you solve mathematical equations and come up with a response to an essay prompt. And this water right here represents your stress levels. Now, the first thing you need to know is that we always have stress. Stress can actually be a good thing. It motivates us, moves us to action. However, over time, the stress either increases or decreases. Let's look at it this way. Let's imagine that first thing when you wake up, what you should know is that your stress levels are normally higher because your brain is on high alert for potential threats. Now, if you're sleep deprived, which most teenagers are, your stress levels rise even further. The amygdala is in this mode of like, something's going to threaten me and freak me out. So maybe you chug some caffeine, which caffeine increases your stress levels. And then you start thinking about all the things that aren't going well right now. Oh, I can't stand school learning right now. Oh, I didn't do my homework. And the amygdala is starting to go into panic mode. You're scrambling to get your work. You realize that you're way behind. You log on late to your classroom. You arrive at your classroom late. And this is what you walk into the room as. And you will notice there is not a lot of room for thinking calmly and logically. That your body is trying to survive rather than thrive. So what do you do in this situation? You could throw in the towel and be like, I guess I'm just going to be unhappy all the time. Or you could try to counteract this experience. So we're going to explore what happens when your emotions, when your stress level, when your amygdala is freaking out. And one of those things is taking a deep breath. Try that with me right now. Just slow inhale, breathe in all the weird smells around you, and exhale. As soon as you take a slow, deep breath in, instantly your amygdala starts to calm down. You get more activity in your frontal lobe. Now let's explore some other things that either make this more challenging or improve our ability to overcome stress. Let's pose this really critical question here, which is, when is the last time you complained? You see, life events can increase these stress levels quite a lot. But what we already know is that circumstances don't necessarily define our thinking. Our actions and our attitude make this better or worse. So ponder, when is the last time you complained? Was it days ago, hours ago? Was it moments ago when you're like, this dude needs to stop with the snake sound effects? I get it, not cool. When is the last time you complained? And I'm going to invite you to consider, does your typical day consume itself with negativity? In a moment, I'm going to play what a typical day could look like for someone your age. And as you watch, just observe, how similar is this to how you have functioned over the past few months?
School. Who invented school? Oh, I hate mornings. My back hurts. My brain hurts. I have to pee. Why do I always have to pee? Why can't I just absorb my pee?
Mom, where's my cereal?
Gross.
Mom, where's my cereal? Mom, where's my computer? Have you seen my computer? I haven't seen my computer. Where's my computer? I hate this computer.
You had one job, Mom. Give me some Fruit Loops. You failed, didn't you?
Stupid computer! Yes, I did my homework. Is that what it actually look like? Gross. Leave me alone, stay off my back, Mom. Roman Empire.
I swear if my brother looks at me one time this morning, I have to pee.
You told me we had Fruit Loops, we had me Fruit Loops, you had one job, Mom, Fruit Loops.
Does that resemble at all your typical day? Now, huge exaggeration there, but how often do we make our stress worse by complaining all the time? You see, if we want to overcome our challenges and our adversities, we have to have positivity and hope. But so many people are what I refer to as emotional hoarders. You know what it means to hoard? Have you ever seen that show Hoarders, where people just collect all sorts of trash until they have no room to even walk in their houses because there's junk everywhere? Some of us do this with our daily lives. We stub our toe in the morning and we say things like, "This day is ruined." We make one mistake in a math class and all of a sudden we think, "I suck at math. There's no way I'm going to understand this." We have one moment where we're frustrated and freaked out, and all of a sudden we get this state of hopelessness. We hoard it all and bring it with us all the time. But the reality is, what we should do instead is look for actively the good things within the world. What are the opportunities and the positive moments? Who are the people who are actually there to help us, even if it seems like a nuisance that they keep checking in with us all the time? How do we actively look for the good? Now, the truth is, this is easier said than done. It is hard to do initially. In fact, our brains are actually wired to notice bad things and remember them more. Remember that amygdala? Your amygdala has priority. So as you go about the world, your brain is first thinking, how do I survive? And then it's thinking, how do I thrive? Now, to top that all off, if we actively look for the bad, we notice it everywhere. But not only that, we miss on other opportunities. Let's see how you do with this.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
Did you see that moonwalking bear? If you didn't, no worries, you're actually pretty normal. This is a psychological study that finds that about 2/3 of people miss this very obvious detail. And it illustrates this huge idea that when we look for one thing, not only do we notice that thing more, but we miss the other things. When I look for my day to be miserable, I will notice every miserable thing. And not only that, I will miss out on all these beautiful opportunities, these moments where I should be grateful for my life, people trying to help me, opportunities to thrive. So the challenge for you right now is to shift that thinking entirely, to actively look for the good. And I'm going to give you a challenge that I have given all of your teachers, and that is to see if you can go 24 hours without complaining. One day without voicing a single complaint. Now, some caveats to this. First of all, you can't control necessarily whether you think the negative thing, but you always choose whether you say it out loud. So your goal is to go 24 hours. Now, if you don't make it long, if already you're complaining about this is a stupid challenge, simply start the clock over. See how long it takes you to go 24 hours without voicing a complaint. Now, I've done this with a lot of my students, and things I've learned along the way is that, first of all, don't just hoard all your negativity and then spew it in a fit of rage after 24 hours. Also, don't do complaint baiting where you bring up something to someone else so that they rage and you're just like, yeah. See if you can go a day without complaining. Set a reminder in your phone, wear a rubber band around your wrist, whatever you need to remember that it is possible to not complain. Now, this one day is not going to change years of habits of looking at the negative, but it will tell you very quickly whether you are prone to looking for the bad or whether you are able to look for the good. And every single time you do this, it will get easier and easier and easier. And you will learn how many good opportunities you have in your life. Now, you might be thinking at this point, okay, like, I don't know if you know this, Chase Mielke, but there's a pandemic. Like, I'm having to learn through a computer screen. Like, how can I find the good and the positive right now? And I'm going to challenge that attitude as well. I'm going to invite you to start looking at your life a little bit differently. Here's what we know. Sometimes we don't actually pay attention at all to the present moment. In fact, I'm going to pose you this question. What percent of our hours when we're awake are we actually present in the moment? Are we paying attention to the moment 100% of the time? No. Are we paying attention 75% of the time? Ponder what you think, because here's what scientists have found out, that we are present for 53% of our waking hours, meaning for when you are awake, only half of your waking hours, you're paying attention to what's happening in the moment. And you might be thinking like, well, yeah, daydreaming is fun. Like, I would so much rather distract on social media than be present in the moment. But what researchers found is that if you daydream or think about the past or the present, it actually kicks on your amygdala. In other words, the daydream might start off pleasant, but then we start ruminating and worrying and thinking anxious thoughts. So one of the things we can do is pay better attention to the present moment. When we do that, we will find the value in the moment. Now, one of the most important attitude shifts that I want you to adopt is what is called finite framing. This has changed the outcomes of my life by changing my attitude and my actions. Finite means it comes to an end, opposite of infinite. And what we need to recognize is that every moment is unique. Every single moment comes to an end. Never again will you sit in front of your computer with your peers, with your family, in the same way on this day watching this. You get it one time. Every time you wake up and you take a deep breath in, you only get that specific breath one time in your life. Every moment is unique. And therefore, every moment has value. So here's what happens if we get too negative all the time, if we don't address this thinking. All of a sudden, all of these negative thoughts, this becomes our new stress baseline. All of our thinking is stressed and anxious and angry. And if we do this over time, it completely destroys our opportunities in life. Have you ever had this thought of, I will be happy when? I have seen far too many people who are like, I'll be happy when I'm out of high school. And then they get to college and they're like, I'll be happy when I have a job and money. And then they're like, I'll be happy when I don't have to do this job anymore. And then they're like, I'll be happy when I can retire. And then they're like, I'll be happy when, because they realize they're old and wrinkly and crusty. Half of their joints aren't even their functioning joints. And they have wasted their entire life waiting for tomorrow rather than finding the good in today. There was a specific moment a few years ago that taught me finite framing. It rocked my world and my thinking around what does it take to have a thriving, functioning life. I'll give you a little backstory. Nearby where I teach, there's this tiny little town called Fenville. Now, Fenville isn't known for much. Fenville isn't like this big, huge town of functioning. It's like the small little yeehaw town. They've got one red light. They've got like a couple hundred kids in their entire school. No one knows about Fenville. However, Fenville made national news across the US. because Fenville was having a record basketball season. This time in the school's history, Fenville was about to make a run for a perfect season. They were being touted as winning the state championship. And not only was this a huge deal for the town, it was a huge deal for one student in particular named Wes. Wes was a junior, and he was an all-star athlete. By the time he was in 11th grade, he had already set school records for most points per game, most points in a season, most assists. He was an all-star. On top of that, he was a model human. He resisted drugs and alcohol. He ate all the right foods. He studied, did well in school. He was kind to the people nearby him. He was a person who was living in his prime at only 17 years old. Now it's the last game of the season. If Fenville wins this game, they have a perfect season and go on into the tournament with favorites to win the entire state championship. Not only is it the last game, it's the fourth quarter, and it's the final 30 seconds. Now, at the time, Fenville is tied with Bridgman 53-53, and there's only a few seconds left. They take the timeout, and the one thought they have in their mind is, how do we get the ball to Wes? And so they inbound the ball, and the clock is ticking and ticking, and they're passing it around with 30 seconds left, and the clock is ticking and ticking. And finally, Wes opens up, and they send him the ball, and the clock is ticking and ticking, and he drives through the paint, drives towards the hoop, and the clock is ticking. And it seems like the other opponents just part like the sea. Wes rises into the air with the clock ticking, 3, 2, the ball hits the backboard, 1, and the game is over. The ball sinks through the hoop, and they have just won and created the perfect season. The entire town is in that field house. They rush out onto the court, and they lift Wes onto their shoulders, chanting his name, Wes, 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 Wes. This is a moment that you would think this guy has nothing but opportunity ahead of him. But all of a sudden, something goes wrong. People realize that Wes is no longer speaking. He's no longer talking. He's no longer responding. Wes grabs his heart. They lower him to the ground, and they realize he's having a heart attack. They start screaming for help, screaming for support. However, some people in the stands don't even know it's happening. They're still chanting his name. They scramble to find an AED to bring him back to life. But it's too late. At 17 years old, Wes Leonard dies in his final basketball game. 17 years old. Now, this is a kid who did everything right. He ate all the right foods. He avoided drugs, avoided alcohol. He did everything he should have. He simply had what was called an enlarged heart. No one even knew he had it. And in a second, his life was over. I remember when that happened in my community. And I remember it being a hit to my gut. Thinking, lives are unique. And we might think that we can wait for tomorrow or the next month or the next year to be happy. But what if now is all that we have? Why am I complaining in every single moment when that moment is precious? That there are people who would love to have their loved ones here for that moment. You see, when we complain, not only does it raise our stress levels, it diminishes our opportunities to realize how beautiful life can be. So recognize, when are the moments when you're attaching your happiness to later rather than now? What would it look like to finite frame, to recognize that you still have life right now? Now, rather than going into this emo space of like, oh my gosh, people are just gonna die, what's the point? Flip out of that negativity, that complaining, and instead turn it into action. One of the things I do every single day is take a mindful breath. When I get up in the morning and my brain's like, shut up, phone, I don't want to wake up, I breathe and remind myself how lucky I am to take that breath. When I'm annoyed because technology is crashing and I don't want to communicate with people through a computer, I remind myself, how lucky am I that even though I'm not in the same state as you, I still get a chance to connect with you. When I stub my toe, I might swear at the world, but then I remind myself, I am glad I still have my toe. This is the shift that changes everything. When you make this shift, you look at your life differently. You see these negative moments and reframe them to positive. You see difficulties and you take positive risks. You remind yourself that even though you feel stress right now, it's your brain's way of telling you you care and that you want to do well. Change your mind around the moments and you change your outcomes entirely. Now, there's a lot that we packed into this time together. But I want to share one final story, one final plea to you all to think about how your attitude and your actions matter more than these difficult circumstances. You see, a few years ago, I was teaching students who were like me as high schoolers. They were angsty, they liked mischief, they didn't like doing well in school. And I remember thinking all these thoughts of how do I get them to see what Pat helped me see years ago? How do I get them to see that when a teacher asks you to turn in an assignment, it's not really about the assignment. When they harp for you for being to class on time, it's not really about being punctual and on time. When I'm learning quadratic equations and I'm like, what is the point of learning math right now? It's not really about the math. I found myself literally at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, just sitting there ruminating. I thought, what do my students need to know? So I actually wrote it down. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I went down to my computer and I just started typing out, what do I want my students to hear? What do students really need to hear and understand? And I want to share those exact thoughts with you right now. As you hear them, think about how they connect with all of the stuff we've talked about. Overcoming fear, leaning into difficult moments, looking for the good, and then think about how can you practice these concepts even today.
It's 4 a.m. I've struggled for the last hour to fall back asleep, but I can't. Yet again, I'm tossing and turning, unable to shut down my brain. Why? Because I'm stressed. I'm stressed about my students. I'm so stressed that the only thing I can think to do is to take my thoughts and write them down tonight and vow to myself that tomorrow I'm going to tell students the truth, the real truth I've been needing to say. This is what students really need to hear. First, you need to know that I care about you. In fact, I may care about you more than you care about yourself. And I care about you more than your grades and your test scores, more than your GPAs and your SATs, more than the state-required benchmark minimum that tells me how much I'm supposed to care. I care about you as a person. And because I care, I need to be honest with you. Do I have your permission to be honest both in what I say and how I say it? Here's the thing. Teachers lose sleep because of you every week. But before I tell you why, there's something you need to understand about school. You see, academic learning is not the main event of school. It never has been, and it probably never will be. Yes, algebra, essay writing, the judicial process, Spanish, all are important. All can change your life. They are events, but they are not the main event. The main event of school is dealing with the harshness of life, learning how to deal with adversity, learning how to deal with harshness as simple as a forgotten locker combination, to obnoxious peers, to gossip, to being doubted by others, to doubting yourself, and still through all of it, pushing to be the best version of yourself no matter what. The main event of school is conquering adversity. It is your resilience in conquering the main event, adversity, that truly prepares you for life after school. Because mark my words, School is not the last time you will face great difficulty. Yes, you will have moments more beautiful than you can imagine, but you will also confront tragedy, frustration, fear, and doubt in the years to come. You shouldn't be worried about the fact that you will face great adversities. You should be worried because you are setting yourself up to fail at overcoming them. Here's the real reason why teachers lose sleep because of you every single week. You are failing the main event of school. You are quitting. And you may not think you are quitting, but you are, because quitting wears many masks. For some of you, quitting looks like throwing the day away and not even picking up a pencil to try to write a sentence or a fraction because you think you can't, or it doesn't matter, or it's not worth it, but it is. What you write is not the main event. The fact that you choose to take charge of your own doubt, your own weakness, your own boredom in order to write when you get challenged, that is the main event. Some of you quit by skipping class on a free education, a privilege that was paid for, bled for, died for by millions of people who came before you. Being punctual is not the main event. The main event is delaying your temptation and investing in your own intelligence, understanding that sometimes short-term pain leads to long-term gain, and that great people make great sacrifices for a greater good. For others, you quit by throwing disrespect at adults who ask you to go to class. Bowing to authority is not the main event. The main event is learning how to problem solve maturely, not letting your judgment be tainted by the stains of emotion. It's having grace and tact when every fiber of your being wants to hit or scream or run away. I see some of you quit by not taking opportunities, chances after chances after chances to pass a class. The main event is not having some letter, some number tell you that you are worthy. The main event is pulling your crap together and making hard choices and hard sacrifices even when it seems impossible. It's finding hope in the hopeless, courage in the chasm, guts in the grave. What you need to see is that every time you take the easy way out, you are building a habit of quitting, and it will destroy your future and annihilate your happiness if you let it. Our society couldn't care less for quitters. Life will leave you sad, depressed, and poor if you can't courage up and learn how to deal with hardship. You are either the muscle or the dirt. You either take resistance and grow stronger, or you erode in the wind. So know this right now. As long as you're in my life, I'm not gonna let quitting be easy for you. I'm going to challenge you, confront you, push you, coach you. You can whine, you can throw a tantrum, you can stomp and scream and swear, and guess what? Tomorrow, I'll be right here, smiling and patient, waiting for you to give you a fresh start, because you are worth it. So do yourself a favor, courage up. No more excuses, no more justifications, no blaming, no quitting. Lift your head up, rip the cords out of your ears, grab the frickin' pencil, and let's do this.
I wrote that video for very specific students, but those are the words I needed to hear as a high schooler. That I had it within me and I had to push through, that quitting wasn't the option. Too often we quit on our happiness, we quit on the potential to grow and to learn, and every time we build that habit. What does it look like if we approach every day as if that day is waiting, smiling, hoping to show us the good in the world? So students of Wenatchee schools, I cannot guarantee you that over the next few days, next few weeks, next few months, you're not going to deal with difficulties and challenges and hardships. There are going to be days that really challenge your patience and your ability. But I can tell you this right now, you have everything within you to overcome them. Take those positive risks that move you forward. Hone your resilience and lean into difficult moments. Look for the good because I promise you it exists, and do not take your life for granted. Circumstances define us, but our actions matter most. Cheers to all of you. Take care of yourself because the world needs you.
Thank you so much, Chase. And thank you to our viewers as well. There were so many powerful messages and strategies that we can use to strengthen our resilience and amplify our happiness in order to live our best lives. I would invite each of you, every person watching this, to just take one thing, just one thing that you heard today, and actually take action in your life. Events like these are great, and we feel good after we see them, but those feelings can fade really quickly unless we actually take charge and change something. I'm just talking about one thing. Take one thing and make it a part of who you are, and that will make a positive change in your life and the lives of those around you. This video, the recording of this video, will be on our YouTube channel, so please rewatch it, skip around to find your favorite parts, but do that. I challenge each of you to do that. I'm so proud of the way our students, our staff, and our community have responded to the pandemic, the crisis that we've all been dealing with. Let's not throw away the opportunity to make positive, lasting changes as a result of it, though. So I invite each of you to, as Chase says, courage up. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a great day.